So we're going to learn a little bit about an investor who has done a bunch of European transactions without having an office in Europe. That I find very interesting because NOAH strategy is similar. We have no offices. And I thought it's not a reason enough to ask Jeff to come, but the transaction track record of Insight in Europe we found quite interesting, and therefore thank you very much, Jeff, for agreeing to the invitation.
Appreciate it.
To speak 10 minutes about what you have done and what you're going to do. Please introduce yourself.
Thanks for leaving lunch to come spend 10 minutes with me. I appreciate that. Insight is a venture capital private equity fund focused exclusively on technology and specifically internet and software investing. We were started in 1995, so we've been at this for over 17 years now. And the sort of core part of the philosophy of Insight has always been global in nature, and in particular, I think we've always looked at Europe outside the US as one of the most interesting places for interesting opportunities in and around technology. And I'd say, particularly in the last 5 to 10 years, I think that the level of entrepreneurialism and interesting companies has exploded in the European framework. So it's been a very sort of exciting area for us to spend time here. My first investment was actually in France. I think our second or third investment was in Spain. This goes back in the late 90s, and we've continued to cover Europe and every facet and every part of Europe. As mentioned, from one office, which is New York. Like London, we have a direct flight to pretty much everywhere, though. So it's worked well for us, even in the European landscape.
Thank you, Jeff. Can you tell the audience what deals you have right now in your portfolio? Give us some names, please.
On the consumer side, which might be more familiar with some of the folks in the audience, we have companies such as Trivago, Provalia. We recently sold a company, Daily Deal, to Google. We have Photobox here in the UK. And on the software side, we have a number of investments, including some out of Russia, Acronis, Parallels. We have one started in Malta and in Stuttgart called GFI TeamViewer. And then on the gaming side, what actually brings me here often is a company up in Cambridge, not too far away, Jagex. So those are sort of a handful of what we have, but probably in total 15 to 20 investments in Europe.
Okay, and why is that? Why are you so keen in Europe? Do you see that you have better valuations, lower valuations to get into versus the US? Is the US really more expensive than Europe today?
I think Silicon Valley is clearly more expensive than Europe for what I don't necessarily perceive to be necessarily justifiable difference. But I think actually, aside from valuations, I think quality is actually a big part of it. I think Europe doesn't have the benefit of maybe one Silicon Valley where a lot of capital plus talent pools together, but it's got a lot of talent and it's got a great fundamental educational system. I think in the 90s, my own observation is Europe suffered in some ways because it was a product-centric culture in a sales-dominated world. And it was all about pushing ideas to the consumer. And I think in the last 10 years, and certainly in the last 3 to 5 years, that's really turned on its head. And you see it in the American success stories as much as you see it in the European success stories. But we live in a very product-centric culture. And I don't think America has anything close to a monopoly on great products. We have a big market in America, yes. It makes it easier to sometimes tap into a larger opportunity set. But we've got companies from Russia that are selling, and 60% of their businesses in the U.S., and they didn't even need a sales organization in the U.S. to achieve that. So I think a lot can be accomplished today from all parts of the globe. I think it does help that Europe, in some ways, as an investor, if you're prepared to put the time and miles in, it is a more fragmented community. And so I think that certainly is not lost upon us that some great nooks in the continent are good.
So tell us, looking at your performance over the last years, especially around Europe, because actually a lot of companies you mentioned, Trivago, Privalia, the CEOs are presenting here, the founders.
Good.
Somebody told me once, inside is a venture capitalist with leveraged buyout success rates, which I quite was a quite charming statement about your fund. How do you do it? What are you looking at when you analyze businesses? You mentioned talent, management matters, but what are the kind of top 3 criteria when you go on the road to Europe and find businesses?
I mean, I guess our 1 and 2 are related, momentum in product. I think what we're looking to do is see people who've, pushed the concept past the point of idea to some level of market traction and success. And once we see that, I think we get excited. And obviously the rate at which that adoption is happening determines our level of enthusiasm.
So growth next to talent is a key point. Okay, how big is your current fund, just as a
current fund is it's a 1.5 billion US dollars invested, about 40% outside the US.
Okay, so we talked about valuations. You confirmed that the hub Silicon Valley, given also the ecosystem, often the left hand sells to the right hand, we know, is the reason why valuations are a little bit higher in the US. You did mention that you have done quite a lot in Europe. Now tell us your experience with the exit markets. I mean, the entry is one thing. Do you find it more difficult exiting businesses in Europe versus the US?
Yeah, I mean, I think you get a little bit of what you pay for it, and that's not just limited to Europe. I think that's true of, companies in other parts of the United States outside of Silicon Valley. The buy-in premiums tend to be somewhat commensurate with the exit premiums as well, but not always. And I think everyone has a different comfort zone, and for us, we're probably more aligned to the comfort zone of a little bit more affordable in, a little bit less sexy on the way out, but with an option that every now and then you might get lucky. I would make a long-term bet that I think that could change in Europe. I think, and outside of the U.S. generally, I think. You increasingly are seeing some very interesting success stories out of Europe that are in the $1 billion plus, sort of exit timeframes. If you look at a Spotify, they're not suffering from sex appeal at this point in the marketplace, and Rovio, and to name a few. I mean, there's plenty of Skype. There's plenty of exciting stories coming out of Europe of a real scale. So I think you're going to see that over time migrate a little bit. But there's no doubt that the guys in the Valley know the guys in the Valley, and they buy companies that they know. They play basketball with them or whatever they do, and that is certainly self-fulfilling, but I don't think that's necessarily a...
So what do you think about the public market exit? Klaus Hommels this morning talked about technology is not an asset class. It's very hard for people to invest without stock picking, and I know some of your companies in your portfolio are kind of getting to that level where they're large enough for a public exit. Do you find the European IPO markets, the stock exchanges, too complicated or too difficult? You trust them? Tell us a little bit about your experience exiting investments through the public market.
So we've never used the European stock market to exit. I kind of view that as a sort of a downside outcome, I think. I mean, if it's a good company of scale and size, unless it's very geographically regional, and I shouldn't say that once. We took a Spanish company public in what was then the ESDAC in the late 90s. But I think the U.S. stock market is very welcoming to every walk of life, and I think investors just want growth and success. For some of the consumer concepts, I think you might need to sort of develop more of a market here. I don't think that's happening anytime soon.
I think we should ask Jeff what smartphone he carries, given that we learned previously that the iOS penetration was very high on the panel. I'm going back to the poll we took earlier. What iPhone or what kind of smartphone?
So first of all, let me just say I've had the biggest problem with my phone today, to a point where if anybody saw me agitated in the back before I was ready to toss it about 1,000 feet. I am working with a Galaxy Note that I bought in Italy because my other phone fell in the swimming pool. I would give it a 7 on a good day out of 10, but things like making phone calls don't always work.
So let me ask you a very important question. Why did your phone fall in the swimming pool?
Because I was carrying an iPad, a phone, and a book, I think, at the same time.
So Jeff, you think that in today's age we are having too much technology in our hands, pockets, and laps?
Or else we need a waterproof phone.
Have you done a mobile investment?
We've done a few, yes.
What is one of them?
We've got one right now that's doing video ad insertions called Gerbo, based in actually Southern California. We've had a few in the gaming side, so those are current ones, and looking at some infrastructure ones as well.
So we are very honored to have you here and spend some time with the European folks. Can you probably convey to the audience what you are most excited about coming to Europe, looking at opportunities? What countries are you focused on? What business models? You talked about growth, inflection point, but what is kind of, for you, the next hot thing?
I'm still looking for that Italian deal, if anybody's out there. I need a reason to go to Italy, but you know, I think we've kind of bucketed. There was a wave probably a couple years ago where there was I'll call it the copycat wave, and you know, Europe, and there's some great investors out here who've done a good job, including us, I think, of sort of looking at some ideas that were working elsewhere in the world and bringing it to Europe, and vice versa, by the way. We stole some European ideas, I think, and brought it to the US. That seems to be a bit of a tougher sort of game to play now. I think now you're back to sort of real innovation, real creative ideas, trying to address probably broader markets than just local markets.
I guess when the copycats start copying the copycats, we should worry about the copying business.
It's a little, let's just say the barriers to entry by almost definition aren't as high as they need to be for sustainable success stories. But first mover was good, and I think those people who took those strategies early have done quite well with them. I do think that it's you know, increasingly looked at as a strategy and makes it that much more difficult to execute. But I do think that there's still plenty of innovation happening here. I'm just encouraged by I mean, I met 10 companies in the last 4 days between Israel and Europe. You know, 3 of them I'm trying to see if I could work something out with, and the other 7 were really interesting, but we either missed it by a day or, you know, they're not quite ready yet. So.
Okay, last question. Let's talk about Turkey, Russia, and Poland. Have you been in these countries this year?
This year, no.
Okay.
So I was supposed to go to Turkey on my way to Israel, but I chose not to. And we have been looking at a deal there. And we've got one of the largest Russian portfolios, so we were certainly fans of it. I've got partners who travel too.
Okay.
And then, what was the last one? Poland. We've been there. Haven't yet found something, but it's
okay.
It's good.
Well, Jeff, thank you very much.
Thanks for your time.
We're going to continue the interviews and going over for
We've got a big agenda today.
Big strategic
Enjoy, guys.
business right now. Thank you very much, Jeff.